Okay, the live thing is on now.
It has been a minute. I haven't totally missed you guys since I was looking at the read awards recipients, and I said, oh, man, I loved that.
It is the best, and it continues to be awesome.
Right?
Oh, wow, that's fancy.
It's just shiny.
I think those two equate, right? Fancy. Look at the end. Okay, I just had a moment of nostalgia. I used to collect all the library bling for two of my fellow counselors, just to remind them that it's been a minute.
You're not gonna go for the root beer? A&W.
It's been sitting there for a minute. Are we all just being polite and taking the other guy on?
And the A&W is the best.
Only one left from the public works end, so.
I might take it then. Because I like a good A&W.
No, sorry. Shut it forward.
Alright.
Okay, and put that file in here.
We are like this.
Where do you live?
No, currently living with my parents, but we get into our house.
Into your house.
But, we're trying to find something here in town, but not no more.
Yeah, we just don't see the inventory. Yeah.
First one in the volunteer.
This is the next one. You need to have that old fashioned experience and just run into the doors with those friends. And that one before getting to play games.
Everybody just had straight to work. I was writing for
My
some
son has.
letters, so I was like, change that. I did that, and I got here right away.
What's the deal?
Yeah, no, it's just, it's like the residual stuff. So we'll see, it's convocation this week, so.
Right. Drop my fan. Oh, man, I'm not a big.
You know, I think that we probably should be putting barriers up front or some kind of lip or something. Aren't we all doing that each night, running around picking up things off?
Oh, yeah.
As we shove them all forward. These side ones just aren't working anymore, let's put them in the front.
I think we have some front ones too, but just to sit on here.
So then we'll just be like, boxed in.
Then we'll be
No
boxed
top.
in. Then maybe we'll learn how to work within the box, okay? Gosh.
I think I feel like I'm at the passport office and just waiting for like this, make sure.
You just brought back memories, yeah, let's not do that.
We get good memories from the passport office.
Okay. Ready? We'll call the meeting to order at 6:59. And then, can I get someone to make a motion to adopt the agenda?
I move that we adopt the agenda, but we, except for the item 6B,
Okay,
that we put that off to another meeting.
great, thank you. I do have one more amendment too. I'd like to add other business, we'll put this as B now. It's the Rural Crime Prevention and Community Safety Workshop, that I had sent out some information on, we can just talk about that. Any other amendments? It's Rural Crime Prevention and Community Safety Workshop. If not, all in favor? It's carried, thank you. All right, so today we have our delegation of Robin Pepper and Lisa Weeks from Shinnecock, probably. So I'm gonna say Lethbridge. And so we're so excited to have you here so that you can tell us about some great stuff. I've been kind of reporting back to council a little bit of the cool things that's been happening with being involved in the board and the most recent library conference, which was fantastic. So
I can do it.
yeah, so you're welcome to come if you want to sit up close if you can, or you can stay there and you can go ahead and tell us anything you want to tell us.
Sure, I'll maybe come up to that chair just because it feels a bit weird to be.
Sure. So yeah, how that?
And Mayor, just for the record, just could we get the name of the other lady that was here?
Yes.
Lisa Weeks, Weekes. Thank you.
Lisa, what is your title?
I'm Manager of Partnerships and Community Development with Shinnecock Regional Library System.
Actually, that's not totally true. Just made Lisa our associate director.
Oh, congratulations.
Still,
That's
it's still
very exciting.
just very much in progress, but yeah.
Awesome.
So Lisa is a Coldhurst resident, which
Yes,
need a
I
hand
was
for
gonna say, did we say that out loud?
I mean,
Golders resident.
I'm not trying to buy you or anything. Yeah.
But
I mean-
we're instantly intrigued by what you
Great. I mean, I have no idea what Lisa's reputation is in this town, but I assume it's stellar. Anyway, getting off to a great start here. Yes, thank you for having us. The purpose of the presentation is just to give you an update on what's been happening with Shinnecock Regional Library System, which is a library support organization of which you are a member. You're one of 41 municipal members and one school authority. Yeah, so the purpose is really just to let you know what Shinnecock has been up to over the last while. It's been probably a few years since I've been in front of this council. And certainly for any new members of council, just to kind of let you know what Shinnecock is and why you spend the money and what you get for it and that kind of thing. So I'll just kind of launch into my presentation. If you have any questions, feel free to flag me down at any time and happy to answer any questions that you might have. So I've given you an information packet that contains a copy of my presentation that you can follow along and make notes if you like, as well as a copy of our current plan of service and a impact report. Just some of the data from the past calendar year, what's happening in libraries and whatnot. So there's a pen, little notebook, and my card if you ever need to reach out with some questions. So yeah, so what is Shinnecock? Shinnecock is a member-driven library service organization, and our primary clientele is member libraries. But what we also do is we kind of exist to make sure that no matter where you live in the southwestern corner of the province, you have access to public library services. So back in the late 80s, this corner of the province, southwestern corner, you've kind of got a bit of a map there. It's very tiny on the handout, but basically we go from BC border on the west, US border to the south, out kind of by Grassy Lake to the east, and then the northern border of Vulcan County to the north. So southwestern corner. So in the late 80s, this corner of the province was the only part of the province that didn't enjoy a regional library service. So there was an initiative of some library boards and some municipalities to explore that. And so they struck a steering committee and they went out and talked to councils, talked to library boards, and eventually kind of arrived at a model for service. And in 1992, the minister signed the system into existence. So that makes this our 30th anniversary. So we're very excited to be celebrating our 30 years of library service. And as Mayor Montina just mentioned, we had a bit of a library conference / celebration at the end of April, and it was a really nice day to gather for the first time in a long time and celebrate the 30-year anniversary of the system. So back in 1992, there were 22 municipalities that signed on. Since then, we've grown to 41 member municipalities and one school authority, and every member that can join has now joined. So we were just waiting on Nobleford to sign on, and they did at the end of 2021. So that makes our system complete. Means that every resident in this area has access to regional library services, which is fantastic. So at the most basic level, Shinnecourt essentially exists as an agreement between municipalities. And I think probably the simplest way to explain what Shinnecourt is that we provide a framework for you as a municipality to collaborate with the municipalities around you in the delivery of library services. Now, Colehurst is a little bit unique in that you're very close to Lethbridge. And so, a lot of people commute and can have ready access to the library services there. You're also the largest urban municipality in our region that doesn't have its own library board and library. And obviously there's reasons for that. You're very close to Lethbridge and whatnot. And I know there are some people, such as Councillor Caldwell, who would love to have a library service in this town. And Mayor Montini, you've talked about that as well. So I can talk a little bit about the arrangement that we have in a moment. But essentially, the fact that you belong, the reason that your residents have access to library services without you having a library board is Shinnecourt allows your residents to go to any municipality in the system and get a library card and use that library as if it was their own. So without Shinnecourt, there would be no obligation for Lethbridge to provide library services to Colehurst residents. But because of this, this collaboration that exists, we can make that happen. So it's a pretty good arrangement for sure. We are governed by provincial legislation. We're a municipal creation, but we are, just like every library board, governed by provincial legislation. There's a Libraries Act and regulation. They're very thin, very kind of boring legislation, but not like what you folks have to deal with your Municipal Governance Act. So moving on to the next slide. So I made a brief allusion to the agreement that brings the system together, that kind of creates a system. And what it does is it kind of lays out in broad strokes the role of Shinnecourt as a regional service and the local library board as a local service. Who's responsible for which aspects of the service. Now, because that agreement is fairly broadly drawn, we do a periodic needs assessment with our members. We basically go out and say, what do you want specifically from us within these areas? How can we make this happen for you? What would you like to see? And so that's the plan of service that you see in your package there. We're currently in the process of our needs assessment for the next plan of service, which will be 2023 through 2026. We do things in 4-year cycles, and pretty much everything we do is very tied to municipal politics because we are, most of our appointees to our board are municipal elected officials, and so most of our funding comes from municipalities, and so it just makes sense to do everything in sort of in alignment with municipal cycles. So the current plan of service is ending at the end of 2022, and we're just in the process of putting a new one together that will go to our board in August. The next slide is about funding and budgets. Our operating budget is about $4 million a year, and I've got a graphic there. Again, it's quite small on the printed sheet, but I can tell you about the important chunks. So the big red chunk is our member levy. We're funded basically on a per capita member levy. So it's based on your current population, and currently the member levy is $7.76 per capita. So every member, whether you have a library board or not, pays $7.76 per capita. And that's the large red chunk, represents almost 50% of our operating dollars. And of course, about half of that comes from the city of Lethbridge because they represent half of our population. There's a differential fee for municipalities that operate a library board, and it's called the library board levy, and that's a $3.57 per capita, and that's the blue chunk. And that is just in recognition of the fact that when Shinnecourt came into existence, there were a number of duties that were performed by local librarians and by the local library board that were taken over by the regional system. And so there was a fee that was established. That fee never changes. It hasn't changed in 15 years since I've been at Shinnecourt. For the simple fact that if we ask our member library boards for more money, they can't just sort of conjure that money out of thin air. They have to go back to their councils and explain to the councils that we need more money. And then the councils are saying, well, why do you need more money? And then they say, well, we need to pay Shinnecourt. And then meanwhile, we're also asking our municipal councils for a levy increase as well. So it looks like we're kind of like double dipping. So anyway, that's why we just leave that one at 357 and it works. And so, that's kind of the story there. The purple chunk, roughly a quarter of our revenue comes from the province in the form of an operating grant. So, and this is one of the main reasons why there was this big drive to form a library system is it actually brings an extra layer of granting into the system, into this region. So that's an extra $1 million that is shared amongst the member libraries and member municipalities for the delivery of library services in this area. So it's a pretty substantial chunk, and it really helps us to do a lot of good work. We do a 4-year levy schedule as well. So what we typically do is we do our budget. Based on our budget, we developed a proposed levy schedule. That goes through our finance committee, executive committee, and then our board. And if it's approved by our board, then we send it out to member councils. And this is assuming that there's a change or an increase to the levy. Councils look at it, debate it, and then either approve it or not. And so in order for that new levy schedule to come into effect, 2/3 of councils representing 2/3 of our total population have to approve of that proposed levy change. So we can unilaterally lower the levy, which is what we did in 2020. We dropped our levy by 5%. So our levies are currently at 2017 levels. And that was just to kind of recognize that COVID had affected municipalities in a pretty serious way, along with other costs that were being downloaded in a pretty severe way by the provincial government at that time, things like policing and whatnot. So yeah, that's where we're sitting at this time. So, any questions about that or anything else so far? Great.
Thanks, if I could on the funding. So is the plan then to roll it back to that 5%?
Well, we're still working on the draft budget, and because we're still finishing the needs assessment, we need to kind of know exactly how the members want us to spend our resources. So, but the very preliminary draft budget that I put together has us back at 2022 levels by 2026. So over 4 years, getting back to that 5%. So, yes.
So then, when you guys spend it on providing services, obviously there's no capital programs, just services and equipment or books, I guess, right?
Yeah, we used to spend more money on capital when computer equipment was very expensive. So we'd buy a server and it was $50,000. But now we have server clusters and it costs $2,000 or $3,000 for a server, and we just plop them in there. And so our most significant capital investments are our vehicles. So we do have 3 delivery vehicles and 3 passenger vehicles that we because we serve the region, we have to we have to be out in the region. And I have to say, buying a vehicle these days has been quite miserable. And the costs have basically increased by almost 100% for some of our delivery vans. So, yeah, we did 4 or 5 years ago, we got a significant capital infusion from the government of Alberta, $2.1 million, which allowed us to completely renovate our facility. And so, brand new, like the plumbing, HVAC, roof, all that stuff has been reset to zero. So, yeah, we don't have a significant investment in plant for sure. Yeah, but yeah, we're mostly a service industry, and we don't have a lot of big machines and stuff, thankfully. So, yeah, good questions. Any other questions before I? Okay, so the government. So as I mentioned, we are. It's a library board. It's a public. Everything we do is public. All of our meetings are public. No one ever attends, but they could if they wanted. It's a 1-member, 1-vote model, so we have quite a large board, and as a result, a lot of our work is done in committee. We have kind of a standard roster of committees, so all the policy work and planning and reporting work all goes through those standing committees. Every municipality can appoint someone to our board. Not all of them do. Your appointees, of course, your mayor. We're happy to have her on our board, and previously Councillor Caldwell was our member for many years as well. So, and also active on some of our committees too. The services that we offer, this is maybe somewhat less directly relevant to you folks since you don't actually operate a library, but I'll just give you a quick rundown anyway. So we pretty much anything that has to do with bibliographic services, which is a jargony term meaning like books and library materials, is all done at Chinook Arch. So these are some of the services that can be centralized. It makes sense. There's economies of scale, and it allows us to do kind of the non-value added stuff centrally. So like things like ordering materials, we can do that centrally. Cataloging, putting stickers on the materials, making them shelf ready, rather than having every individual librarian in every little library like ordering something, having it shipped to them, and then putting the stickers on and putting it in the catalog. We can do it in bulk, and just saves so much money, saves so much time. And then that, of course, frees up the local librarian to serve the public, which is where the value is for public libraries. IT, we run a very extensive IT network, so all of the libraries are networked. We use the SuperNet to deliver a lot of electronic services, and we have technicians that will keep the libraries going with their technology. We have purchasing services, but they can buy their computers through us. We run all of the software that manages the check-ins and check-outs of the books on a system-wide basis. Even though every library is independently governed, we basically kind of operate like a large multi-branch library. So everyone has agreed to share the materials. So if there's a book that you want that's in Fort Macleod, you just place a hold on it, say I'm going to pick it up at the Crossings branch in Lethbridge, and our vans will take it there, and you can go and pick it up. And then of course you can return it there, and our vans will take it back. So yeah, there's a lot of software there. We offer the library's websites. We're the internet service provider for the libraries. We have an IT help desk. So these are just things that are services that are hard to find, especially in smaller communities. And if you can't find them, they're very expensive. Or it's like there's a delay, like turnaround. Someone's got to come out and fix your computer. So they can just put a computer that's broken on the van, send it to us, and we'll fix it and send it back out. Or our technicians will go back out and install it. We have 3 librarians that their whole job is just to support libraries with any aspect of library operations, whether it's policy development, collection development, reference questions, space planning, anything. Running a library is a very complex job. Even a small library in a small community there's a lot of moving parts to it. So we have staff that will help with that. In a community, say the size of Milo or Carbon Gate, you're unlikely to find someone who's had prior library experience or knowledge of library world. So we offer training that will bring a new librarian up to speed on how to do some of that stuff, and then support them when they encounter a new situation. We also offer digital services, and I'm not sure if any of you folks have tried some of the services that are available on the Shinnecourt website or Lethbridge Public Library website, or whichever your home library website is, but you can download books, audiobooks, you can take online courses, all kinds of stuff through the website, and it's really quite a rich selection of materials. These services are quite expensive to offer. We spend about $300,000 a year on this stuff. And so it would even be difficult for Lethbridge to offer it on its own, but by everyone working together, we can make sure that, no matter where you live in the region, you have access to those digital services. Delivery is one of the big ones as well. So we have 2 vans that go out every day moving material around the system. And we definitely, in 2020, it took a bit of a hit. There were about 450,000 items that moved around the system, about half of what our normal payload is. In 2021, we were back up to about almost 800,000. So things are rebounding, but yeah, there's a lot of materials still flying around the system, and people are still reading, and they still want their stuff, and we take it to them. And programming, we've been exploring some programming. We hadn't done this in the past, but the libraries are wanting to offer programs in their communities, but it takes a lot of resources to develop a program and present it. And so Shinnecourt has been getting into some of that as well, and I think we'll be doing more of that. Highlights from 2021. So yeah, libraries are getting busier. Again, people are going back into the libraries, and it's been really amazing. Councillor Caldwell had mentioned the READ Awards, and that's something that our marketing committee at Shinnecourt does every year to recognize the excellence in the smaller libraries and any of the libraries actually around the system. And honestly, the innovation that has been displayed over the past 2 years is just astonishing. The ideas they've come up with and the way they've adapted to new realities of libraries in a post-pandemic world, it's been really like heartwarming to see for sure. So we're kind of dipping our toe into the automation world a little bit. So we've got book lockers, which is kind of a newer concept. Some libraries are deeply invested in it, like Calgary Public Library. You go into some of their facilities, they've got hundreds of these things in like rec centers and stuff like that. We have one small one in Piikani Nation, and we have one in Waterton. And basically, it's kind of a hold pickup location. So if you're living in Brockett, you don't have a way to get to Pincher Creek or Fort Macleod, you can just you can place a hold on an item using your phone, and our vans will deliver it. And you just show up with your card, scan it, and then the locker pops open, and it checks the book out to you, and then you close the locker, and then you can just return your book there as well. And there's also a small browsing collection, so you can kind of look through the window. If there's a book you like, you just again scan your card, choose the book, and then it opens, and then you check it out. So kind of neat. But definitely, it's not a substitute to like a full library service for sure, but
How much does that, like, how much one of those things cost?
$40,000.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's a capital investment.
Yeah.
Luckily, for each of those, we've been able to get grants that have
Okay.
paid for those. So it's we don't want to take money that we receive from our members to serve their communities and like use it in like to like serve like just one tiny little like because it's a pretty big chunk of money, $40,000. So and it was kind of like a proof of concept for us. Like, will it work? Will people understand it? Will they use it? And we're still, I mean, the Pecani one is still very fresh. It's only been up a couple of months, and usage is not like certainly not stellar, very like at this point. But we're hoping to get in and do some promotion and like it's just a brand new thing in the community. It's like it's what is this thing even? So there might be some work that needs to be done there in terms of like marketing and getting people up to speed on what it's there for and stuff. So the Waterton one is a little bit better used for sure.
I was just gonna say, though, that speaks to what you've been saying for years, is that libraries are so much more than books, right? So this is a really nice little asset in the community, but it's not a library.
Exactly, yeah, for sure, yeah. It literally is only books. So, but it's been neat, and it's been cool to see the community. Lisa was kind of in charge of the county when she set up the partnership that made that happen, and it's exciting to see the response from the community. People that feel like they just don't have much in the way of services, and then suddenly you've got this thing and they're keen. So, looking forward, as I mentioned, we've got our new 4-year budget that's being developed as we speak. Needs assessment underway, and we're looking for a new plan of service 2023 through 2026. And so, yeah, probably around the end of August or early September, there will be a memo that will come before your council saying this is the proposed levy schedule for Shinnecourage for the next 4 years. And if you'd like me to come back and speak to the proposed levy schedule, I'm happy to do that as well. And I think that's all I had to say, unless there are further questions.
What is the needs assessment looking at? Is that
Our largest target for the needs assessment is talking to our member library staff. So we do a questionnaire for the board. We do online surveys, but for the most part, our primary constituency is our member library staff. So we had a discussion back in March, just trying to get an idea of like what they were feeling about where things were going with libraries and what they might need help with over the next 4 years. And there were some themes that emerged from that discussion. And just over the last couple of weeks, we've been having specific online Zoom sessions to kind of brainstorm around some of those themes and get into a little more detail. And so, yeah, that's what we've been doing, and that will all go into that's what will kind of inform our plan of service.
I was curious because it was like, what communities need a library?
Right, yeah. I can think of one. It's really about the libraries that are already established, like how can we support them best over the next 4 years or so. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's amazing the kind of things that you were hearing, like even today, like some stuff you don't even think about. It's like the libraries are struggling with offering point of sale. People are coming in, they want to pay their fines, they want to get a library card. Nobody has cash anymore, and it's very expensive to offer a point of sale system. So is that something we could explore on a regional basis? Definitely going to look into it, because that would be such a boon to them. So because they rely on some of that revenue to keep their doors open. And so if we can facilitate that somehow, like centrally order and manage that money on the library's behalf, that'd be fantastic. I've never looked into it. I have no idea about point of sale, but if it goes on the plan of service, we'll start looking into it for sure.
That's right.
Thank you. Just a question on the library lockers that you guys have in Moncton there. If you were to put something like that in Coalhurst, how would somebody from town go about getting a library card if they don't really have, say, like a from the city? Like, is there any sort of like card drives or anything like that you'd be able to do?
That's a good question, and I should have mentioned that earlier. You can actually get a card online. So as long as you have access to the internet, you can go to our website and register for a card online.
Okay.
So you could literally be standing in front of the machine, get your card, it sends you the number, and then check out a book right there.
Awesome.
Yeah. So libraries are slowly entering the 21st century, but it's taking us a little longer than some other industries.
That's why I should just sign up for while we're sitting here. Just trying
Did
to-
you?
Yeah.
Oh, really? Nice. I don't think that's ever happened before, but my hat's off to you.
I was curious, like when I go to Lethbridge to sign up for library card, they want to charge you a fee. But when I signed up online, I was not asked to pay any.
It may be, I'm trying to remember, like I thought right now Lethbridge is fine. I don't think they are charging for their memberships.
Oh, okay. Well, they used to, I guess, a few years ago.
They did for sure, yeah. Yeah, they're currently fine, or not, I keep saying fine, but membership free.
Oh.
The memberships are free. So that's why it wouldn't have asked you for any money. Did you sign up as a Lethbridge?
No, I said it was Colhurst.
Oh, okay, yeah. Yeah. I think Colhurst people kind of by default are assigned Lethbridge.
Yeah, because we
So-
still have the bookmobile, right?
Yes, yeah, yeah. Mhm.
So that would be
Yeah.
our home library. Just for now. Just
Yeah, because you don't have a library board, you can't actually sign people up as Colhurst patrons. So you'd have to choose a different member. And Lethbridge makes the most sense because it's got the largest collection and it's the closest, and the memberships are free. If you want to picture view, you have to pay $15, which they would appreciate, but why would you? Anyway, yeah, so that's it's smart enough to know that if you live in Picture Butte, it'll say, okay, you live in Picture Butte, you have to get a Picture Butte library card, and it knows to charge you $15 for that. And then you can't actually pay in the sign up thing, but you can go to a different module and pay for your library membership in this separate little thing. So our interoperability is still not amazing, but we've kind of cobbled a system together that sort of works. Part of the tricky thing is that all library software, and this is like very deep level library nerd stuff. Sorry for taking up your time, but Alberta is one of the only jurisdictions in the world where we charge for a library card. Like it almost doesn't exist anywhere in like the Western library world. And so none of the software that is out there is designed to collect fees for library cards. It's just kind of assumed they're going to be free. So when a library board wants to charge for a library card, which many of them do, a lot of them have dropped their fees lately, but we have to kind of like hack our own system together to make that work. So it's not ideal, but
I love that though. I love that that's a challenge presented that way.
we do what we can, yeah. Because I mean, people want, especially with COVID, when libraries were shut down briefly, and they went to like a kind of like a what do you call it, the curbside service. A lot of them, but things like renewing cards was a challenge, and so luckily we had just launched this online service right before that, and it was very well used during those first few months of the pandemic when people are like, "What do we even do with our time?" So
I see that there was a big increase in online services,
yeah.
so that was nice.
Yeah, there was a huge jump, and then it kind of like leveled off a little bit, but overall in aggregate, it's been about 12-15% increase over baseline. So
That's project.
So I know in McGrath, they recently, like in the last few years ago, they combined the public and school into one system. Can you talk about that and how that's working? Is that working well, I guess, or?
it's always a mixed bag. I have mixed feelings about public libraries and schools. It can work really well because you've got like a built-in bunch of customers in like the children that are in the school and their parents that are there to pick them up and stuff like that. So that's nice, but it's also a deterrent to many other members of the community. Like a lot of people just don't feel comfortable going into a school. So a lot depends on how it's designed. Like, can you get into the school or can you get into the library without having to go through the school is critical. I know in McGrath, the librarian there is a bit disappointed that they lost a lot of their senior users. They just don't like to go into the school. It's intimidating and it's loud. So I think if she could do it over again, she would not want to move into the school. Having said that, in Barnwell, one of the things that got them a new school renovation was that they said they were going to move the library, the public library, into the school. And I think if you talk to the librarian there, she loves it. And they've fully combined their collections. So so it's like there's not like a separate school collection, public library collection. It's just one big collection, and it doesn't seem to have been the same issue in that community. The one thing that does seem to pop up consistently is issues of policy. So a school library has a very different focus than a public library. A public library has like there's a whole like ethical framework around intellectual freedom, and we have there's something in my library to offend everybody. That's like this library shirt that people wear at library conferences. And so if you want to serve like the entire diversity of your population, you need to have materials that reflect things. So that means that there might be stuff in the public library collection that is many people would not consider appropriate for a grade 3-er, right? So, and how do you prevent them from getting their hands on it, or what do you, or even things like internet, that comes up too. Like libraries like to offer unfiltered internet. Most of the filtering systems will filter out, if someone's looking for information on breast cancer, most filtering systems will just like filter that out. So you can't get that information that you need because it's just going off of keywords, right? So they're getting more sophisticated, but they're still, most school networks are locked down. And when a public library comes in and says like, no, our public Wi-Fi is free and open, and the school is usually like, not anymore, it isn't. And when the little like 10-person volunteer library board comes up against a behemoth of, a school division, like the school division always wins. And so any library that's moved into a school has lost a certain element of that freedom of access to information. So it's something to consider quite carefully, but it can work for sure.
Can I ask you? So if you were looking at a high school, I mean, I'll just be honest, some of the considerations we're having, and they're just preliminary conversations, just what ifs conversations. If we were looking at partnering with the high school and possibly partnering with the college to provide some online courses on the computer systems there, right? So to have a learning center in there as well.
Okay.
I'm carefully writing down everything that you're saying.
So you're talking about like setting up a public library in the high school, or
looking at doing.
Okay.
If we were considering setting up a library in a school, high school,
Okay.
and partnering with them.
Yeah.
And giving some consideration to looking at the college and looking at some online courses for the learning center there.
Okay.
As well.
Cool.
I mean, I know that, I think, was it Olds or something that did that? And they partnered with Olds College and they offered some for their students and.
That's not something I'm familiar with for sure. Yeah, there's all kinds of models that are emerging. A lot of communities are building these large rec plexes. So there's the rinks, and there's the curling rinks, and there's a library, swimming pool sometimes, or like water slides and stuff like that. And that can work. It's just nice when there's like when a library moves into a school, that it's already a school building, and it's it's got its established policies and things like that. And I think that's maybe a little more tricky than if it's a new build and like there's a school here and there's maybe like a common area between, and the library's over here, and it's like there's an agreement and this is a leased space and it's architecturally separate from the other building. That's maybe a little easier. But if a public library is moving into a school, you're moving into the school division's turf, and they kind of call the shots.
I really appreciate hearing you talk about this.
Yeah, I think that's really great to get your perspective on that. I guess one of the questions that I have is like, as a smaller community that doesn't have a library, like what would be the first steps for us to consider, like what this could actually look like for us?
Well, it's there obviously there's some costs involved with running a library, so it's good to think about what you might be willing to invest in operating a library. The Libraries Act says there's a minimum per capita investment. I think it's like $3 and something. The average funding per capita in this part of the province is $28 and change per capita.
Okay.
So that's what most library boards on average receive for funding from their municipalities. About $28, $28.01 I think it is actually. Within our region, province-wide it's about 26 I think. Calgary and Edmonton, because they're so well funded, they kind of skew the numbers up. So I like to just kind of focus on what's happening in the southwestern corner. And some of them, like Glenwood, puts in like $60 per capita, and some which shall remain nameless put in like $4. So, and you can really see like Glenwood is one of the best used libraries in the system. So, you get what you pay for to some extent. So there's that. So you need to make sure that there is funding available. And depending on how you do it, if you're starting a library from scratch, there are obviously startup costs. There's some, you want to get a sort of an opening day collection, they call it. So when the library opens, so you want to have some books on the shelf. And we've done a couple of those in collaboration with vendors. Like there are vendors where you can call and say like, we need 5,000 items, for the entire, all age groups or whatever, fiction, nonfiction, and they'll actually put that together for you. So you just pay for the stuff. You don't have to buy each individual book, which would be a tremendous amount of work. But really, I guess the first step is to form a library board. So that gives you the legal, corporation that could oversee that for you. And that also triggers, if you form a library board and provide it with some funding, that also triggers a provincial operating grant that is per capita. It's $555 per capita that the province kicks in. And so then there's at least a little bit of money flowing as well.
Is that for a year?
Yes.
$55.
$5.55 per capita. Yeah. It should be more.
I think it was 50 something dollars per person.
Libraries are pretty different.
That's
Yeah.
fascinating.
That'd be, honestly, like provincial funding has been very stagnant. We are still being funded at 2016 levels based on 2016 population. So the grant amount hasn't changed in 6 years or 7 years now, and the population they're using hasn't changed either. So we're way behind. And what's happened over the last 10 years is like, this is provincial funding of libraries and this is municipal. It's kind of like gone, and then it's been like the stage stopped, and then municipalities have been really taking up the slack. So in terms of about the $180 million that go into libraries in the province, the provincial government pays like about 35 of it. The rest is municipal money. So if you're ever talking to your MLA and you're like, come on. Because it does, Chinook Arch is, we have the privilege of a good municipal funding base, but like Carmen Gay Library, they need a break. They need the province to kind of step in and increase their funding, because it's been, especially with inflation the way it is, and it's hard. So I think, some libraries are definitely on the brink of, being viable. So.
What do you think could be some solutions to that?
Well, it's hard to know. In some ways, libraries are victims of their own success in that we're really good at doing more with less. And we've done that for years and years. And so people are like, wow, my library's great, and they're doing such cool stuff. But they don't realize that, the person who's doing that stuff is getting paid $19 an hour for one thing. And they're getting paid for 25 hours a week, and they're working 35 hours a week. And we know this because we do a salary survey, and we ask them about how many unpaid hours they put in. So a tremendous amount of work is done by volunteers. The boards, often, like if you sign up on the library board, it's like, oh, you're also vacuuming the library, right? And that kind of thing. So, not in every case, but these are kind of the extreme things. But people are so devoted to the libraries, and they want to keep the doors open, and so they just keep doing it. And I think if there was like a mass closure across the province, because everybody loves their library, like even people that don't use a library, are like, they still believe the value of libraries. They still think it's an asset to their community. And so they would fight to keep it open, maybe because their grandkids use it, or their, whatever. So, really what is needed is, although the flip side of that is like, right now we're a tiny department in municipal affairs, it's a tiny fragment of their budget. So we've managed to escape a lot of the cuts that other government departments have been experiencing since the new government came in. I'm not sure. They could increase our library funding by 10%, and it would be $3 million, which is like a drop in the bucket, right? And on an overall provincial budget. So a tremendous, like a small amount of money would do incredible things for libraries.
When we're talking about like Barnwell and McGrath, is that partnership with the school help with that operating costs and or other costs and supporting?
I think it can help. I think in most cases, the school assumes responsibility for the heat and lights. There are some arrangements, like in Stavely, the libraries in the school as well, and the school division actually charges them a pretty hefty rent. So, there's as many different models out there as you can imagine. But that's all stuff that I guess you'd want to establish in the agreement. But for the most part, the schools have been like, well, you're here anyway. You know, you're using a tiny portion of the amount of energy and stuff that we consume. And so they just kind of cover it. I do have, if you're interested, I have a number of sample agreements between school divisions and library boards that can at least provide a starting place, and at least give, you know, if it's something you're considering, an idea of what things are looked at in looking at that arrangement. So I can send that to Mayor Wantina if you like.
That'd be great, thank you. Other questions?
It's great discussion. I haven't had this many questions in a long time, but it's wonderful to have people that are interested in, and engaged in the library world. It's neat.
Well, thank you so much for coming. I think that this was really great and you guys gave some really great figures too, to kind of, I think, figure out like what this could look like for us as we kind of go down this path and see what we can do for our community, so.
Sure, and we're happy to help with whatever, like, you know, often, I mean, we've been at some of the tables with negotiations with the school division.
Okay.
There are other considerations as well, because there's things like, you know, we need certain network connections to run some of our services. So how can we work with the schools to, like with McGrath, you know, they have the supernet in McGrath, like every school has a supernet. So, but how do we, can we like plug into theirs, or how do we keep our network separate and that kind of thing? So, so yeah, there's a lot of things to consider that you don't even right off the bat would be like, oh, didn't think about that. So,
Oh, okay.
Have you heard of any like capital grants for building libraries up there at all?
I have not. It's so rare to see a new library that is built, unless you're in Calgary and Edmonton, which, I mean, for a while, Calgary was building a new branch about every 18 months, which is astonishing. I'm assuming that might have slowed down now. I'm not totally sure. They put all their money into that sort of like landmark building downtown. But we can certainly look into that. Lisa has an uncanny ability to conjure money out of thin air. So,
She's from Cool. Yeah.
so I mean, we're aware of a lot of the grant programs out there, a lot of the lottery funded ones. We've got some familiarity with like things like CFEP, and a lot of those cap out at $100,000, which doesn't really get you a lot if you're actually building a building. But there's also, you know, sometimes there are private foundations that are, I mean, they don't really work with the library board though. You need to typically be a charity. And you know, something can start very small and very modest. You know, it can start in a storefront or in a vacant former retail location or what have you. Or it could start in a little corner of the school. So it doesn't have to be a big thing right off the bat. You don't have to, you know, come up with a giant splash. Most libraries didn't start that way. They kind of started as a, you know, little closet and a curling rink, and then somebody donated a bunch of books, and then they had to expand, and then it's eventually moved into its own building. Or sometimes it's libraries share a space with the municipal office, or, you know, there's any number of models out there. So if you have a broom closet in this building that you're not using.
Oh, I think we're getting pretty full of here. All right, well, thank you so much. This was really great.
Thank you for your time and all the best. And yeah, again, if you need us to come back in the fall, we're happy to do so, or any other time.
Awesome.
Thanks.
All right, well, have a great night.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll move on with our agenda here. So looking at the 2022 operating budget, this is a continuation of the conversation that we had last time. And so I guess right now, I'm going to just open it up for any additional questions or pieces of feedback that people have on this before we look at the motion here. Go ahead, Councilor Ackermans.
Thank you. Just had a question. I might have missed this last week. There's a lot of information and I was trying to take some notes. But I noticed there was a YWCA job posting that speaks providing services in Coulters this summer, so if you're hiring for that. So I'm just a little bit curious on the history of it. Got a couple questions, just kind of like how long has this been going on in the community? Is there any stats for attendance? And is there any cost to the town? I guess I'm just looking at it in the lens of it kind of seems like it might be duplicating what FCSS is trying to achieve in the community. So I'm just seeking a little bit of clarification on the impact of that within the community.
Go ahead.
Madam Mayor, it's operated for a number of years, actually. I mean, COVID sort of shut it down, obviously. And what happens is the YWCA has, you know, been gracious enough to come out to Coalhurst and provide the program. It's a summer program for, I think, 6 to 11, 12, somewhere in there, years old. We do pay, you know, some money for it. I think it is roughly about $13,400, roughly in that range is what we've been paying. So we subsidize a little bit for them to come out here. They do provide us a year-end report when it's all said and done, when they send us a bill for funding. They do hire their people as indicated. They train them so that they're qualified to deal with the children and what needs to be done. They do utilize our facilities, like mostly Myers Park is pretty much where they do most of their stuff, the social area and kind of down in that area. And it's a drop-in program, so there's no real, you know, commitment, I guess, if you want to call it, from what I understand. But I think it's been pretty successful. And like I say, it's back again this year, but it has been not operating for the past couple of years. And in terms of duplication of FCSS, FCSS has obviously the Move It's and the really young sort of programs. They've been operating like the Youth Drop-In Center for the past few years. And then they've done sort of, which has been sort of, I think, grade 7 to 9 and then 9 to 12, somewhere in that range. So a couple of programs there. So to say, you know, so I don't feel it's really a duplication of FCSS. I think it is a separate thing, and it's only run for the 6 weeks or whatever in the summer. And, you know, gives the younger children something to do, I guess, on 3 or 4 days a week. I think operates. So.
If I could, do we sign a contract with them?
Not a contract. I mean, they, like I say, they kind of indicate sort of roughly what they're going to charge us for the year, and it's more or less just an agreement that we pay to send us a bill with the report and their costs for operating it, and that's all we do. But I don't think we physically sign that agreement, I can recall.
Okay, thank you. I just, I probably could pull up the report from last time they were here. And I'm gonna be honest with you. Thank you for bringing that up, because that was on my list. I have always been concerned with the amount that we spend on such little service for our kids, because it's $14,000 over 6 weeks at 20 hours a week. And so that works out to $100 and something dollars an hour. And, you know, on many days we had sort of 4 kids there, or we had, you know, maybe 7 kids there. And I think in total there was maybe, I want to say 19 new kids showing up throughout the course of the time. Most of them were sort of repeat, and it felt like it was a pretty big chunk of money to invest. And I know that I brought this up before, so this is no surprise, CAO Howda. I continue to bring it up. And I think that $14,000 would pay for a point position for a rec coordinator for like half a year, for 6 months versus 6 weeks of children's program. I would even hazard a guess and say within that we could have a point position for a rec coordinator, and we could hire some of our high school kids, or if there's anybody that's, you know, that's responded to the advertisement on our site, to just get in there and provide some services, and maybe a partnership with FCSS. But it just seems like we have so many different things with budget implications. It seems like, because it's something we always used to do, it doesn't feel like it's a good decision from a budget perspective. So that's why I was wondering if we'd signed a contract. I don't know what anybody else thinks. But I'm not sharing any secrets with you. I've said this almost every year that we have them here.
Councilor Hopkins?
Yeah, just to kind of further my thoughts on this, I think from my understanding with FCSS, one of the things that they're talking about is they need for them to provide services to the community, they need to see a need for the services there. So I'm wondering if there's an age gap for the 6 to 12-year-olds that this program would address. Maybe if we talk to them about offering something, maybe we can get some uptick in that and then work with them to provide that service. They're already in the community. And the $14,000 for 6 weeks seems like a pretty steep amount when we could do a lot with that money. Like Councilor Caldwell said, you know, if we had a rec coordinator or somebody, I think that would go a little bit further. By no means do I want to take away the opportunity from the kids in the community, but I think that if we're mindful of how we spend the money, that there might be a more suitable or an option that maybe provides a little bit more bang for your buck within the community.
Go ahead, Councilor Patrick.
I'm just thinking about, I mean, I never had children attend this yet. My daughter was less than 6 when COVID started, so now she's 8. So now she can potentially go to this program. You know, it's funny because the FCSS program every Wednesday, it's like, my kids are always there supporting it, right? So it's, you know, I'd be curious what kind of a program they offer. And I do hear what everyone's saying about, well, could we do it more effectively, get a better bang for your buck? I don't know if we could get that in place for this summer, I guess. Is my concern is if we wanted to offer some kind of programming, would it be too late, I guess? Would it too late for this year? Or would it be better to start this the following year and get everything lined up for then, I guess? That's kind of my question is, I'm in support of spending our money more effectively. I'm just concerned with the timelines of this decision coming to us just before summer. So that's kind of my concern that if we've already lined it up, for example, we should probably just follow through. I guess is my comment.
I think with FCSS too, like their whole mandate is prevention, right? And so I'm not really sure like if the YWCA if their program is in that same realm or if it's not. And so I think that that's something that we kind of need to look at too in terms of the programs that FCSS may provide, that if they are comparable, what the outcomes are for them. Like I really don't know. And so I'm not sure that we could say that FCS could do that based off of that premise, but maybe they could. No idea. Yeah, so that I guess that's my thoughts on this point. Councilor Flores, did you have any thoughts on this?
Thank you. Yeah, just like absorbing all the conversation. I did want to say one thing though. FCSS does run the summer fund program in Nobleford. And I appreciate what Councilor Potter was saying about the timing of it. But I guess just even with the process of getting it set up, I mean, with it being, post-COVID year and everything, I guess there couldn't really be an identified need, but based on previous years, like what was the user levels like? Deputy Mayor Caldwell, you had said that there was about 19 new kids each year.
Well, I recall from the previous report that there was, and I think that was one of our biggest years, was there was 19 new kids. So they would track the number of children that are there each day and the number of children that are new or repeats. And so throughout the 6 weeks, it was, I believe it came to 19 new children and averaged between 4, 6, and sometimes they were higher numbers, but they were consistently, and they always have. I mean, I think we had like one stellar year that seemed like, okay, well, this seems a little more viable because we had a lot of kids out there. And I don't know what was different. I don't know what changed to make that happen. But it's consistently been just since they raised their prices, it's been a pretty expensive, entertainment for our kids, hey? And I mean, I hear what you're saying and I get it. And I feel the same way. I want something for our kids, but I want it to be something that's kind of homegrown and cost effective and smart. But I mean, we have the ad in the paper. The FCSA, I'm looking at you thinking about the FCSS fund program. But you know what, I kind of caved every year because we always talked about exploring new things for the next year. I've always done this, right? Because I want something for the kids. And I understand that it's resource intensive to get something like this started.
And I think regardless of whether there's summer programming happening over at the park, like SCSS still runs programming during the summer, whether it's not summer fun, there's still going to be events put on by SCSS, and things like that. I would be interested, and I know we can't get it this year, but I would be interested to see stats on users and to be able to get a pulse on that, and make a good decision, if it's even something that's well utilized. Because what I'm hearing is that it's not been well utilized in the past, and maybe not for that season money.
So we do one of two things. We either just say, we're good, scrap it, scramble, try to find something, or we say this year we go with it, but we mark it like hell. We get the information out to people and we make sure that people can actually take part. And we start planning for something that is more of a community-based type of thing. Right? That's what I meant. Sorry, what community is the summer fun program in?
No,
No, thank you.
Yeah, I think that without seeing like the actual user data, it's really hard to know, again, if this is worth it in that realm. But I do agree with Councillor Poetry that we are getting close to that start of summertime. I'm not sure if any of the parents here are counting on this or are looking forward to it. And I guess my thought is that potentially for this year, maybe we consider going forward with the program. And then looking at the statistics over the past couple of years, to see, and to do a comparison for next year to see if this is something that's viable and that we should continue to do. Go ahead, Councillor Ackermans.
Thank you. Yeah, I can agree with that. I think that, we don't really want to change things at the last minute, but I do think that going forward, we should take a good look at this and see if it is in the best interest of the community, or if there's another way to provide something that might be a little more cost effective going forward.
Great, thank you. Councillor Butcher.
I might suggest maybe we refer this then to the Rec and Culture Committee for review, I guess,
For next year?
for next year. Yeah.
Clarification? Okay.
Yeah.
I think that makes good sense. Great.
Do I need to move that, I guess?
Do we need a motion for that?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, if you're making a motion to refer it to that committee to look at, then we should have a motion.
You gotta make the motion.
I move that we refer the YWCA Summer Fun Camp Program to be reviewed by the Recreation and Culture Committee. For
2020.
For 2022.
Any questions on that?
Yes, please. I guess just more about the program as well. How many youth are we looking at hiring for that?
How many registered?
How many youth are we hiring that on our website?
I think we usually have two,
Two?
I think, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, they like Madam Mayor, they basically run it. I mean, they just come to us and say, hey, can we book your social area for these days and times, basically for those months. They put out the ad for, interview people, or training people, they bring the, whatever supplies they need and all that type of stuff every day when they come. And then, like I say, at the end of the summer, they give us a report, send us a bill, and that's kind of it, so we don't have a whole lot more to do. I mean, obviously, in addition to what we pay, we do donate the Myers Park area as well, so it's given at no charge too, so there is that to factor in, so.
Any further questions? Call question, all in favor? That is carried, thank you. All right, is there other questions on the budget or things that anyone would like to bring up? Go ahead, Councillor Florence.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Martina. So as we had discussed the budget at last meeting, I just wanted to thank the efforts of staff to be here and present information for then and for now. It's as being a new councillor, it's been a very interesting process and a big learning experience to go through. But I did want to bring up a few of my thoughts from our last meeting. So a large amount of money this year was spent on public works and operation. We have yet to set strategic priorities and have not quite identified what's close for spending. And as such, I'm concerned about the budget for the shop project and the lack of supporting information. I believe we can continue to be okay without a shop for another year if there's delay because of budget changes, and I would be okay with that as opposed to rushing without enough information. Last week we were presented a little bit of a confusing agenda. I didn't even realize it was a shop proposal, not a fire department expansion proposal, because of the lack of headings and somewhat blurry pictures included. I'm concerned about this because there has not been a true process for being able to weigh in on this if it's a priority, whereas the fire department shop has been identified in the underwriter survey as a need. Although neither project have been shown to council with a request for decision and supporting document to be able to make a decision, I wouldn't be comfortable moving forward on either project until the information is received. However, at least there is some documentation to prove that we made that fire department expansion. I have other questions as well with the process, and I really do feel that a proper request for decision, proposal, and information to council, those questions would be answered through that. Questions like, just small questions like, which side of the shop is it expanding to? What's the process for public consultation and appeal for a town project? Is this the best place for it? Has there been an identified need for an upgraded dog kennel from a master plan or from SPCA? The current one seems to be doing its job, so is this an area we're willing to spend money on? What is the additional space needed for? We're currently fitting into our shops, and I'm sure there are very good answers for this. I'm not public works and I'm not an expert, but I would like to see justification for this project before making such a large budget decision. I guess the other thing that I can continue is we talk a lot about our focus and where we want to be focused. And while operations are important to maintaining the town, I'm not sure that a new shop is imperative to maintaining the town. And as such, I would argue that money allocated for a shop would be better spent elsewhere. As such, I would like to have a discussion around the budget and hopefully move to either approve the budget with the changes mentioned, or would be comfortable pushing the budget approval for another week until staff had a chance to update the budget in order to be able to move forward and approve it. I realize we are in a time crunch with assessments needing to go out, and I'm very cognizant of that. However, I'm really cognizant of the fact that we're spending tax dollars. We are in council and we're going through budget for the first time, most of us for the first time, sorry. And in my research on budget preparing and approval, most councils do take 3 meetings at least to deliberate and pass budget. And I'm being also conscious of how our decisions will impact the residents of Culvers. And as such, although it isn't ideal with our staffing changes and to be going through the budget so late, I don't want to rush this process. And I would like to see more information in order to be able to approve this. I would also like to say I don't want the 5-year plan, but based on comments from the last meeting, I look forward to making some changes and talking about that further. And just with the new council and stuff coming out of COVID, and knowing now what we do, I look forward to doing it earlier and being able to spend more time on it without a sense of rushness. I wanted to say I so appreciate our Director of Corporate Services, Mike, mentioning that at our last meeting as well, and I appreciate all the municipal experience he brings to the table for these very important conversations, so thanks, Mike. I know in the past we briefly discussed our current budgeting process and if it should be changed, and if council should vote on each purchase or capital purchase should fall into a broader department budget set out each year. But since we have not decided if we're going to pursue that model, I don't feel it's okay to approve this budget item without further justification for why it is the priority. This is a huge capital project that will impact the operating and capital budget, and I'm not okay to move forward for this one for 2022. I would like to see that money allocated elsewhere. The area of recreation and culture preferably, or for the fire department expansion mentioned, once, of course, the necessary information has been provided to council in order to make good budget decisions.
Thank you.
Can I ask further to that, if I might? In the past with other council, when there was conversations, this conversation is about the town shop initiated a couple of years back. And there was a bunch of information that was brought forward to council. And I'm wondering if we have access to that same information.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, in terms of the town shop, it was talked about in the previous year's budgeting process. The basic need for it was when we purchased the extra fire or the new fire truck, and sort of as indicated by the fire underwriter survey, it was suggested that we should maintain the one that is being replaced as a backup to further our insurance sort of stability in terms of that. However, with that, at the present time, there is no space for that vehicle within existing shop or fire hall buildings that we have. So the discussion was, in a sense, do we look at adding on to the fire hall or do we add on to the shop? The shop was looked at as the simpler and the most cost-effective option in terms of, if you may or may not know, but the new shop does not have a concrete floor. It's basically a dirt floor. It's heated storage is really what it is for what we have in there now. And it was said for, the sake of, the way it was built originally was we could add a couple of bays onto it at roughly that, 150-ish thousand range to basically store the one fire truck that is now sitting outside, or, and then additional, we've got some different, other equipment that could be put in there from Public Works as well. So it was felt as, in a sense, maybe the most cost-effective way to address the situation, other than looking at renting a bay somewhere for the, the fire truck at the present time. And the fire hall addition was mentioned as a possibility. We did do some drawings, obviously, with the architectural firm that you saw the pictures from there in the past, of which Councilor Coultry is with that firm. And basically, we talked about it if we did add on to we basically did kind of a feasibility study to see if it was possible to add on to the fire hall and basically, in a sense, add the front bays and go to the back and add bays onto the back, which would provide a bay for the peace officer's vehicle, as well as for the new fire truck, as well as for some additional fire truck equipment space or whatever. We also talked about, where their offices are, adding a second level onto there to basically be our EOC and, training room, that type of stuff, a little bit more to be utilized by the fire department as well. However, the estimates provided for that were in the neighborhood of $5 million plus. So I guess at this point, that's where that's at. The shop was 180, it was felt at 150. In terms of the kennel situation, even when we were with Cold in the peace officer situation there, they did an assessment of kennels within the municipalities that were being served at that time, which was Picture Butte, Barons, ourselves, and Coldale, obviously. And our basically kennel did not meet up to the SPCA type standards. So for a longer type situation, or for, to house a dog for a rescue type thing, or a cat, it was not up to an acceptable standard. For maybe a night or two or something, possibly, but the nature of what it is in terms of even to clean, the feces and that type of stuff, and the, waste, that type of stuff, it's just not set up well. It has the dust and the dirt from the shop in there as well, and just not real conducive, and like I say, not up to SPCA standards. So that's what we were told. In recent conversations with our peace officer, they've indicated that other than, I think, Raymond at the present time is the only one that really has a kennel that's up to a standard. Coaldale is perhaps looking at upgrading theirs. Tabor, I think, possibly has one, and then obviously the city, but the city, we have touched base with the city in terms of perhaps entering into an agreement with them for, if a dog was held or a cat was held for 2 or 3 days, that perhaps they would take it and deal with the rescue end of it on a longer term basis. But they indicated that they, at this point in time, were not interested in entertaining that in any way, shape, or form. And as it stands now, pretty much all the rescues are filled to the max. It's very difficult to find a place to place an animal for rescue, even at this point. So, so that's kind of the logic. I mean, like I say, the shop was looked at as basically just an add-on to the existing new shop that was built. It was a UFA type structure that was built originally, and basically, UFA type structure that would be added on to it fairly easily. So, as far as information, I mean, I think our director of operations, had a little bit of a plan in terms of what that building was, but it's nothing fancy because, like I say, it's a UFA steel building, no concrete floor at this point. And basically that was kind of the reason for the need of it at that point. And I think just due to COVID and due to other things, that's why it didn't move forward in the previous year's budget and was put back on to see if we wanted to move forward with the game. I will say that, for interest's sake, all the capital expenditures that you see are none that affect the municipal mill rate. 99% of the time they do not. We usually look at grants, reserves, debt, borrowing if necessary, those types of things, offsite levies as we've seen. So generally, our capital is funded other than an effect on the mill rate. But, you know, if council chooses to, you know, put the shop on hold for another year or to look further at other options, it's easy enough pulled out, but it will not affect the proposed mill rate that's in your package tonight, as far as actual. So. And again, depending on, even if, you know, we get a price from a couple of firms to build it, if the price should exceed whatever figure we put, say 150 or whatever the case is, we could still say, well, then that's, you know, council will have the option to say either we put in the extra money or we don't for now. You know, there's that option too, so. You know, if that helps at all, that's.
So I just have a question about this. When I look at the capital budget, with the shop addition, we have it at $180,000 and it's coming out of the MSI allocation. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not like it's actually coming from our reserves or anything like that. It was coming from the allocation that we still have in the province. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for providing that information, and I do appreciate that. And I think the thing that stood out to me the most is that if this doesn't go ahead, that it wouldn't be a big deal. And that wouldn't affect the mill rates. And so I think that based on what you're saying, I think, and I appreciate the information, I think that would be good to see that information, and have it as part of our package to be able to consider it. But I would like to see that taken out of the budget for 2022.
Other thoughts?
I would be comfortable with, knowing that we're going to have two pieces of machinery that are left out in the elements. I would be uncomfortable with it having come out of the budget unless we know that we can find bays to store those. Like some bays that are close by. Do we know, does Public Works know if there's options that we can?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I do know that, the car wash individual, I think over here had added an extension onto his thing, and possibly there was, you know, possibly a rental situation there. I'm not sure price wise or anything to that effect. I think Syncor as well had added onto their building as well, and possibly there were, you know, a bay rental that could be there, you know, for temporary or some sort of purpose as well. You know, and again, with the fire truck in particular, I mean, you want it to be relatively accessible, because first of all, you know, they have to exercise the pumps and whatever, you know, a certain amount of time to make sure that they're ready to go if and when. I mean, again, it's a backup to a backup to a backup, you know, so you do have two before it would go out, but if there is that situation, it needs to be in operable enough condition to be able to respond. So, and obviously if it's sitting outside, especially in the winter, you know, they have to make sure that the pumps and hoses and whatever different things are drained appropriately to not cause more damage as well, or put something else outside if it's put inside. So,
Did the underwriter's survey indicate that we should keep that third vehicle as well? Are you familiar with that?
they were indicating we should keep it as a backup to reduce our insurance ratio scenario.
Council Florence?
Thank you. And I appreciate that. But I guess even when we think about our current stuff right now, so the only thing parked outside right now, and you can see it, is that fire truck. I mean, some equipment can get rained on. It doesn't all have to be inside. Like, why can't that fire truck be put into a shop bay and some stuff slightly moved over and make room for it, right? Like at this point, we don't have enough equipment that we're running out of shop space. So, and I guess like further to that, we've identified one vehicle that needs to be covered. But again, like I would like to see like which other vehicles need to be covered, and we're not seeing that information, right? And again, I would like to see like why can't you pull something out of the shop and just back it into that shop? And I know I'm getting into the weeds here, but this is exactly the kind of thing that a request for decision I think would address, and it would address some of these smaller details. And yeah, and so I think there's options without going ahead on a large capital project. And I think and I'm not saying that we shouldn't go ahead on this, I just would like to see the justification for it. And I think that is being responsible. And I know that even one of the questions I had last week, and I was, I guess, a little bit confused with the two different things, but was that there was a difference when they had gotten the proposal a few years ago, and so the budget had slightly been adjusted. But honestly, like Robin was just saying that the costs have gone up like 100%. So do we even know, that, you know, when the costs come in, that it won't be way more than that, right? And then we're already, you know, have broken ground and are committed to a project that could be potentially way more. Yeah.
And you know, I think that's an important discussion though that you're doing, and it would be really valuable information for us to have, to know, so what is our investment in service vehicles in this community? Like, I know we talked the $1 million mark, but I don't know in terms of what are our fire trucks and our public works vehicles that are required. And, you know, and I think that would be important for us to have before us. And we look at, you know, sort of we sort of had just a quick discussion on what it would cost to repair hydraulic systems and things that have been left out in the elements. But having that information, again, yeah, like you say, I don't want to spend a lot of time in the weeds. I mean, I don't, but you're right, it's part of a justification that says we require these kinds of things because, you know, we have to keep our equipment. Well, we want to extend the life of them, right? We want to ensure that they can live for their 10-year or their 15-year max use that they're identified. That's right. And that was the information I was talking about. When we initiated these conversations, so that came forward as from Public Works, sort of a rationale for it. And I don't know if we have that somewhere.
I'm sure whatever we had at that point would be accessible.
Somewhere.
Yeah,
You know, but I mean, it speaks back to what I was saying earlier too, right? When having, you know, when you have new council members and you're in the midst of big decisions about capital projects, it's important to pull all that information back forward again if you're expecting that council to make those decisions, right? Because those are big financial decisions.
Just a couple questions with this. So, again, not knowing very much about construction, but I'm assuming that we're getting close to like construction time up here. So if we were to either, like there's a couple of different things I think we could do with this potentially. To go back and to request more information and more of that request for decision for this. Of course, that would then push it back a little bit. If we were to do something like that, would we miss the window for construction to start or something like that? Like, because I'm assuming we'd have to go to tender and do all of those things. Would we be missing a window if we push this back into like next week or something like that?
thank you, Madam Mayor. I think the nature of the building that it is without the concrete floor and that type of stuff definitely is something that could be assembled even in the cooler months, like towards winter and like fall sort of thing, fairly easily. It goes up pretty fast because it's a package. And like I say, I mean, we're not sure. I mean, like you indicated, I mean, Mr. Hepper indicated that, you know, vehicles and different things definitely have increased. That's why we did increase it a little bit in our budgeting process as a result. Plus we threw on the kennel as well. So that increased the cost a bit too for about $20,000. But again, as I said, if we get a couple of quotes and it turns out to be $250,000 or something like that, I mean, we still have the option at that point to say, let's defer this, you know, for the point. I mean, we're not going to move ahead with it until such time as we know kind of what the dollar figure is. Similar to, I know there was talk about, you know, even the Unit 401 with the fire department. You know, again, if vehicles have even gone up more than perhaps buildings, you know, that may be exorbitant, and it may be 2 years before we get it too. I mean, you know, fire truck we waited an extra year, our garbage truck that's now in Lethbridge, we waited an extra year for it as well. So, so things are definitely, you know, backed up. I mean, look at the car lots and whatever. A lot of them, there's not a lot of car inventory on there either. So, and prices are up, and there's not a lot of, I guess, negotiating room on some of those cases either. Like I say, the fire truck and those types of ones, we do put out a fairly detailed RFP because of all the pieces that it has on it. The town shop, I think we basically just get a couple of quotes from UFA in different places and see where it's at in terms of that. So, and then we'll bring it forward as to here's the prices.
And then my other question, and then we'll go to Councilor Butchie. My other question with this is, So, I'll go to you, Councilor Coach, then maybe I'll think of it.
I'd just like to second what saying about how it was in the construction season and this type of building. The only part that you couldn't build in the winter would be foundations, which is, there's plenty of time to get those in this type of, until November, right? So you have quite a bit of time, and then the steel erection could continue through the winter if needed, right? So I think the downside of tendering through summer is that you have contractors busy, getting busy, crews getting staffed up, so then you have a slightly, winter pricing is usually slightly better than summer pricing, but in terms of COVID, it might be the biggest impact overall. I don't know that we've seen in any of the projects we've been working on, 100% escalation anywhere. That's insane on any kind of construction project. We have seen significant escalation, 20% on one project. But I wouldn't, I don't expect it to continue to go up, not definitely. So it's going to settle at some point.
Councilor Ackland?
Thank you, Mayor Martina. Just kind of my thoughts on this. I realize that we have to present a balanced budget as a community. I was just curious, if we were to not include this on the budget as it is right now, possibly have the information presented to council on an RFD along with some pricing pulled together so we know the concrete numbers that we'd be looking at, would we not be able to amend the budget down the road if this was to be paid for with MSI funding and then just kind of have that still operating at a net zero at the end of the year? Because I'd rather have the information presented to us with numbers so we know what we're looking at versus saying, hey, go ahead with this up to a certain amount, and then if it's different, we gotta change things. Because from my understanding of things, we should be able to do that and still kind of look at this project and possibly have it built this year, but still kind of keep it off the budget so that it's not an automatic up to a certain amount. And I would feel better personally if we went that way, if it was possible, just so that we can make that informed decision.
So yeah,
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, certainly, I mean, like generally you want to approve a major part of the budget. I mean, that's the plan. But you do have the options to amend the budget for certain things if necessary. I mean, I think we indicated that at the last meeting that even if we put this figure in at 180 and it came in at, say, 250 just for the sake of it, we would still have to come back to you and you would have to say that we amend the capital budget to, now include this at, whatever price it came in at to be funded by, et cetera. So, I mean, you do have the option to do that. You do have even on the operating part, I mean, depending on what it is, if there's something that needs to be amended, I mean, it can be done. But certainly in the capital, like saying it does not affect the mill rate in any way, shape, or form, most of them, you definitely could have the option to add or delete certain things into it. And sometimes when we have done the interim budget, depending on certain projects, we do have to, move stuff along. We have had discussions to say, let's move ahead with this project, and it's approved even prior to the final budget by council with the resolution as well. In this case, obviously we didn't do that, so it's here for approval or not now. But certainly, like I say, to pull it out for now, we can check some pricing, we can, bring forward a little bit more stuff as indicated, and then you can decide whether to amend it to, put it in there or not, if that's what you choose.
great, thank you. Deputy Mayor Caldwell, did you have?
I did, yeah. As we were talking, I was going through the SPCA site, what was, sort of what was acceptable for animal, for bylaw purposes, right? Storage animals, and I understand what you were talking about, and what our case officer was talking about. I would wonder though, if we were to say that we were not moving forward with this, what would the budget implications be if Public Works had to go back to how they were attempting to purchase, sand and things like that from the city of Lethbridge? Like, I know that there was times when they just weren't able to get it and they had to go out looking elsewhere, and that seemed to chew up a pretty good chunk of change, because that was also a part of the budget, right? Is sort of putting those forms in so we could bring in our own sand and bring in all of our own, I don't know, what was he saying, mixtures of things, whatever, I don't know. I am not going in the weeds, okay?
Director of Corporate Services, Cassie, you had something?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Those shopyard blocks would be a separate item to this addition, those were two.
Oh,
Those were
sorry.
in the operating budget, they'd be a separate.
Okay, I thought they were all rolled in together in one big price. Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
And further to that, the blocks were just to, the existing sand, salt, those types of mixtures that we get, it was just to separate them a little bit better, because when they're loading, unloading, and doing whatever, right now, they just have some ties or whatever, which they spill over and
Put them in
don't
piles,
keep it
yeah.
as neat, so it's just to keep it neat. We haven't, our director of corporate operations had also talked about at some point setting up some sort of a sand and salt mixing shed of some sort too, just to have, but at this point, that hasn't come forward for the discussion, so.
So in hearing all this conversation, I think it's been great. I think that, going through this budget and really digging in is very important for our role. So thank you all for doing that. What I might suggest, just based off of what I'm hearing, and I'd love to hear your feedback on this, is that at this point in time, we remove the shop addition from the capital budget, with looking for more information on it. And then potentially the intention to amend it. After we get that information, we can make that decision, based off of what that is that we hear from administration. Any feedback on that?
I would like to see that as a motion, that we remove it from the budget, and I would like the votes recorded on that motion, please.
Sure. All right, so I will make that motion, that we remove the shop addition from the 2022 capital budget. And request that administration provides more information and a request for decision to council for discussion on if we would like to include it in the amended 2022 capital budget. All right, and you've requested that the votes be recorded for this?
Please.
Okay. I'm going to, is there any, questions on this? Or otherwise, I'll call the question. All in favor? All right, and opposed? Great, thank you. The motion is carried. Okay. All right, is there other things on the budget that anyone would like to discuss before we look at a motion to approve it? If not, would somebody like to make a motion to approve the budget?
I'll make that motion. Okay. I move that the council of the town of Colhurst hereby adopts the 2022 operating budget and the 2023 to 2025 operating budgets respectively be approved in principle as presented by administration. Furthermore, that administration declare bylaw to authorize the rates of taxation for the 2022 year, which includes a 0% increase in the residential and non-residential municipal mill rates.
I just have a question on this, as we're doing this motion. So we're doing, just for clarification, we're doing the operating budget. Is this just the operating budget? Or, okay, good. I thought that I heard capital budget in there too. Okay, great. Any questions or discussion? If not, I'll call the question. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Okay, so we had some discussion on the capital budget, and so would somebody like to make a motion to approve the capital budget?
I can move that.
Great, thank you.
I move that the council of the town of Forest hereby approves the 2022 capital budget and that the
and the 2022 to 2026 capital budgets respectively be approved in principle as presented by administration.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go, sorry, go ahead, CAO Howard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think you may want to say as presented and amended.
Okay, okay.
That was gonna be my comment as well.
And just quietly sitting on my hands.
Is that okay with you, Councilor Okoji?
That's
Perfect. Any more discussion?
Thank you for making that amendment, I was about to make that as well.
If not, we'll call the question, all in favor? That is carried, thank you. Okay, so moving on now, to our next section, which is bylaws. Looking at the bylaw to authorize the rates of taxation. And, would somebody like to make a motion to, do the first reading for this bylaw? Great, thank you.
I move that bylaw number 436-22, a bylaw to authorize the rates of taxation for the 2022 year is hereby read first time.
Any discussion? All in favor?
So sorry, just to clarify, and that rate is staying,
0%.
zero, okay, I just wanted to clarify that, thank you.
Yeah, I'll move the second time, I'll move that bylaw number.
Can we finish up the vote first?
Oh,
All in favor?
Oh, I thought we just did.
Well, we just did.
Oh, we were, and then, sorry.
There we go.
It's the windows, you can't see.
That's carried, and now you can do that.
Yeah, so I'll move the second one, I'll move the bylaw number 436-22 is hereby read a second time.
Any discussion? If none, all in favor? That is carried, thank you. And the third. Great.
I move that bylaw 436-22 be given 3 readings at this meeting.
Any discussion? None, call question, all in favor? That is carried, thank you. Okay, and the final motion, I'll make this motion. I move that, or can I make this motion? If I make this motion? I'm going to. I move that the bylaw number 436-22, a bylaw to authorize the rates of taxation for the 2022 year, be given third and final reading, and that the mayor and chief administrative officer be authorized to sign and seal the bylaw. Any discussion?
I guess just, that's fantastic, guys, thank you so much. We have to pull this budget in with all the inflation at a 0%, I mean, that is, kudos to you, thank you. That was the only discussion.
That was great, that was great discussion. We'll call the question, all in favor? That is carried, thank you. All right, we're motoring along today, guys, we might even be done early.
Please don't jinx us.
I know. So I'll move on to the Hollister School Division value scoping sessions. CAO Howda, is there anything that you wanted to add on to talk about for this?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Not a whole bunch, I guess, obviously, as you've seen, there's the 3 sessions that are coming up here in June. And I guess we've had some brief discussion prior to, and sort of just wanted to, I guess, discuss as a council, perhaps a little bit ahead of time as to what things we may want to see. Obviously, we, still, I think, we'll need to wait to see what happens at the first session with Palliser, just to see what their thoughts are, what their process is, what their maybe thinking is. I know I did see some conversation about the land or whatever. I just want to say in terms of that, obviously the one piece of land that the previous council had offered to them was behind the elementary school that sits now, on the basis that the town does own that land. We do know that there was, a little bit of coal, slag, that type of stuff that has been a bit of an issue in the past. I know that there was we definitely had some environmental assessments done on it. We provided that to the school division. The school, I understand, has also done some geotech and that type of stuff on it as well. And as I say, the last, we did ask previously 6 to 8 months ago sort of for information as to what the results of their testing was. To date, I've not received anything from them. I know the previous mayor had reached out as well, and we haven't really officially heard, in terms of that. How it would work. There is on that piece of property in our stormwater master plan, possible provision, there is, a storm pond that was listed as being there, which, possibly could be altered around there, depending on the road structure that went through there. But it was felt that it could work. And as far as any other land, I'm not sure, other than, we said if that's not suitable, then perhaps we'd be looking into the recently annexed quarter section of land, which would have other implications in terms of, obviously it's not town owned, so we would have to, deal with that situation as well, so. And other than that, at this point, without knowing from the school's perspective, what the options are, what they might be looking at, whether it is the library as talked about tonight, or, track, soccer field, football fields, whatever you want to call it, common area for a meeting room, that type of stuff. I mean, there's a gym. I understand that the previous elementary school, the understanding was it was a community gym. However, it's never really worked out for that purpose because it's utilized by the school and just hasn't been readily available for public. So, whether that's something to consider as well, so.
Councilor Butchie.
Well, I know that FCSS used to use the gym, school gym, until they were able to move into the community center.
Yeah, kind of limited space. I think that's one part of the reason they were looking for something else, a little more privacy for their counseling and that type of stuff was a big issue.
Yeah, but that's, sorry.
No, okay.
No, I was going to say, I've worked on a lot of these projects, so I might just explain a few things if that's all right. We have the Alberta government provides a certain allocation in terms of space for students based on a formula of how big the school is. For example, 600 student gym, for elementary school is about 400 square meters, right? Now, if you wanted to have, in high school it gets bigger because of bigger kids, right? So that's just an idea, right? So they have certain allocations for certain areas. Now, if we wanted to enhance our sports program in the town, for example, that could be, for example, one area where we could partnership with, and that's what City of Lethbridge does on every school. They have a policy that they contribute $185,000 to every school that's built to expand it for the community use. And but I think the school would be. I think this is where we get to dream big and have or kind of create a vision, I guess, really for this. I disagree that we need to just sit down and wait. Oh, what is the process? I think we need, we can wait and see what the process is, but I think we need to be the leaders and come up with the vision about things that we think could be realistic, right? And maybe the school division shoots them down, that's fine, right? But I think we need to have a starting point together as to what areas that we might be interesting. So I think it might just be good to go through a list, have a list of all potential options. Go through them all and just say, vote on them or something, right? And just, I can put together a list and we can have everybody contribute to it and just kind of go through it. Because some of the things, I think what we want to get for the most part right is the base building area, right? Because other things like programs can change. Depending, if you have one office, if you have a few offices, it could be whatever program, right? So whether it's, so that's kind of my kind of spiel as to what I think we should do in terms of programming. And I think it would help then guide what in terms of grants we could look at. And of course, there's none for the library currently, or for a few. So, but I think part of it is getting creative too about what kind of grants we are available, I guess, as well, right? If there's a grant available for, I don't know, cultural art gallery spaces or something, I don't know, or a museum, right? I don't know, is that something you want to put in the school? I don't know, but I'm not deciding enough. I'm not saying that we have to interact to anything. I'm just saying if there's a grant for it, maybe we should look at those first and then this museum now, but then in 5 years, maybe it's something else, so. Because the museum died. But at least they have the space, right? So you can do what you want to do.
Councilor Florence, did you have your hand up?
No, sorry, no.
No, you're good, okay. I just had a question, and at the last meeting, this was just kind of at the end, we talked about who was going to this, and I don't think I had clarity around who was actually attending on our behalf.
That was kind of mixed up, and then it was kind of happened really quick, and it was like sign off, so.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So who is it?
I think it's,
So I was going.
You're going to all 3 sessions?
Mhm.
Okay. And were you our only one?
I thought you would indicate, oops.
Okay, well,
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. The motion we passed was that the mayor and the deputy mayor would be
okay,
attending, and then obviously some administration people, possibly myself and Director of Corporate Services. And then Councillor Poultry had indicated that he would be there, not as a council member, but in another capacity.
okay,
But again, the invitation did say that they weren't limiting it to anybody. It was open to as many as you wanted, I mean, from administration to council. So they clarified that in a second or third email.
okay.
I can't imagine what 18 hours the conversation is
It's gonna be great.
gonna.
Well, this is the opportunity where we get to make our case. Out of this session comes a document which goes to the Alberta government, education and infrastructure. And that's, when they look at this document, they're gonna decide if it gets funded or not. Right, so if we can present a strong partnership opportunity, it helps further our case for funding, right?
Yeah.
So that's why I think we need to brainstorm some of these ideas and actually have, some idea of a way forward. Saying we could contribute, this much to the library, this much to Geneva, this much to the whatever, right? Or maybe it's, sports fields or whatever it is, but we have those, the building, I think, is the strongest tool that we have to try and get those, because the government doesn't want any sports fields, like no school gets funding for sports fields. They don't get funding for playgrounds, they just get funding for base buildings, so we can say that those are partnerships, but they're automatically partnerships in every single school division, right? So the land is the same thing as given, right? So, and I know we've been talking a little bit about this, I guess we're not sure if they would even entertain a new school, or maybe it's just an expansion of the high school or something like that, right? It could be expansion of an elementary, could be a number of different options, right? So that's kind of looking at the whole thing holistically and saying maybe a new building makes sense, maybe a modernization and a new building, or maybe a combination or something like that. So when we bring forward these things to say we want a library, it does change that formula, right? So that's why it's important to have that idea ahead of time and not kind of wait to find out at that session and say, oh, we caught off guard, and we won't be able to present a strong case, I think.
Can I ask then, if we were to go in there and talk about a shared library space, would that be the time to talk about what are your policies around your library? Library use and, intellectual freedom, and what are your policies around all these kinds of things, right? Or do we have those conversations in advance? Or seek that information in advance?
Well, there's a different question of kinds of ways you can go about it, right? If you look at the high school on the west side, is it Chinook High School, right? They have the Catholic, the
Yeah.
library, and then the public. And those are all separate buildings that just happen to have a corridor attached. And the schools have their own separate libraries. There's actually no partnership other than a door.
interesting, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But then you look at like McGrath and Barnwell and Staveley, et cetera, those are integrated, combined.
Yeah.
So, and part of the argument is, well, kids can go to a public library and be exposed to that anyway.
Mhm.
So,
But I mean, it would hamper our ability to provide services to our community if they say, well, this is our building, our facility, you have to operate under our policies, right?
Yeah.
And I guess, you know, and I really appreciate what Robin was talking about, because, I mean, we may move in this direction anyways, but I want us to have the conversations about the things he brought up, like, if they're doing a modernization, it wouldn't be a complete gut and build, so the library might be in the same place it's currently in. And so,
Well, like in McGrath, they gutted the old library and just grew it pretty much. They took out a few classrooms and grew it, so it became bigger than the existing footprint, so.
yeah, so we'd have to, I don't know, like, currently you have to go through the school to get to the library, so we'd have to alter that kind of,
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
right?
Yeah, that's what they did with McGrath, they put it separate.
So I guess with this, we know that the first session is on June 20th. Is this something where we want to have a little bit more of a conversation at a committee of the whole to talk about what these potential projects could be that Debbie, Rick Caldwell, myself, and whoever's in the administration could bring forward? Because I think that I really do appreciate what Robin brought forward today in terms of looking at that in terms of it sounds like a great idea, but then when he's talking about it, there's other things to consider. And so maybe that is something that we could have at our next committee of the whole, where we can just have a discussion around what could potential projects be so that we can bring that. If that works. Councilor Ackerman?
Thank you, Mayor Martina. I agree with what you're saying there. I also think that the community engagement survey that we had, that we're gonna go over with the strategic planning might be that's what the community wants to see.
That's great.
So I think that if we had a community of the whole session talking about this, we can use some of that information to reflect what the community's wanting. It's that, I'm not saying our individual interests are out to lunch, but it just gives us kind of a better understanding of what our community wants right now.
Yeah, that's a great point. So I think if we can move forward in that fashion, I think that would be helpful. And CAO, how you will connect with them to let them know who's attending.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. All right. I did add on for other business the Rural Crime Prevention Workshop. This was something that a community member had sent to myself and Councillor Ackerman a while back. And I forwarded it to all of council and just wanted to put it out there that this might be something that people may be interested in attending. If you don't have the link, I can send it to you guys right now. But it is something that is happening, I believe, on June 22nd. And so if anyone is interested in attending, we could make a motion for this as well. So pop it in here. I do believe that it is an online session. Councilor Florence?
I think that I can actually go to that,
Okay,
and I'm really very interested in going to that.
great, okay. Is there anyone else that's interested? I know a bunch of us will be visiting. Councillor Ackerman?
Yeah.
You'd be interested as well?
Yeah.
So I would make the motion that Councillor Florence and Councillor Ackerman are approved to attend the National Knowledge Exchange Workshop on Rural Crime Prevention on June 22nd. Any discussion? Rehab?
Thank you. I just wanted to say that I appreciate you bringing this up. I know that this is something that our community has been focusing on, so I appreciate any opportunity to learn a little bit more about how we can better assist our community members, and looking forward to it.
Well, I'm glad. This was one of our community members who brought this forward to us, so I appreciate all the stuff that she sends to us, because she's got a lot of great information for us. So we'll keep forwarding it your way as it comes through. We'll call the question now. All in favor? That is carried. And can I get a motion to adjourn? Oh, go ahead. Yes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Could I just ask a simple question? In terms of, I just had Public Works was asking about, we usually put up flags for Canada Day at the front entrance there.
Yes.
And last year, if you recall, we had put up some of the orange flags in terms of National Day of Reconciliation. So they just were wondering whether we wanted to go the full orange again or alternate with Canada orange, because we do need to order some because they were fairly whipped in the wind, so we do need to order some. So if we want summer or whatever, we would have to look at ordering that. I don't know what your thoughts are. There's basically 2 on each of the signs that are out there, the welcome signs, and then 5 more poles are out there, so 7 on each side.
Okay.
So,
And what did we do last year?
last year I think it was full orange.
Okay. Thoughts from anybody?
Can I just say, shameless plug for Culver's. First of all, I think the Canada flags driving by are absolutely beautiful. That was a 150-year thing, absolutely gorgeous. Last year with the orange flags and, not to make light of it, it was also, a really nice, gesture to drive by. I think that having those flags there is just, I love that in Culver's, some of our community, pride comes from flags, and I know that we have like minor city flags and, the Canada flags up front, and really as you drive by on the highway, it's beautiful, and those orange flags were really just a love, or an acknowledgement, and, I thought it was really good of the town to do that. I just have a question, and maybe this would be something that would be better referred to agriculture, but there is a few different dates. I'm wondering, would it be too onerous for Public Works to change up those flags for the different, dates?
Drastically, really.
Just because, and I don't want to say them because I'll probably get them wrong, but I think there is, like there's Canada Day, and then, when is the new one that was just established last year?
It's in September, I believe.
Yes, and then September 30th.
Okay, so, okay,
I think June 27th is a.
Yeah.
and last year they were left
Day
up
of some sort too.
from Canada, they were left up from Canada Day to that date, so they were left up for many months.
June 21st is National Indigenous Peoples' Day. I believe. Yes. So do you have a suggestion as to like?
I would like to see them both up. I mean, I don't necessarily have a suggestion for like the order if they can both be up at once or at different times. But I think they're both really, really nice things. And I would like to, if we need to order more, I would hope that we could just order more. That didn't answer, that didn't help at all, did it?
So, well, I think I heard you said both.
Yeah.
So, you know, if you, like say, if we alternated them or something to that effect possibly, that's a possibility as opposed to full orange or full Canada, obviously, but.
Or could it be like, Canada Day ones around Canada Day, and then in October, go full orange again? September, sorry. I'm terrible with
Yeah.
dates.
I mean, I don't know if you're talking that June 21st, whether you want orange up around that day too, and then they probably change it to Canada Day till after Canada Day.
I think it would be nice if we could do that, in recognition of National Indigenous Peoples' Day, or the June 21st to Canada Day. And maybe we have Canada Day until we switch over for September or something like that. That works, I don't know. 'Cause what do we have up there right now?
Nothing.
Nothing? Okay. Whatever you wanna do is in the middle works for me. If we kind of just do them around the time though. Any other thoughts from anybody on this area? But I do think we should order some more of those flags, absolutely.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
This is just a random fact. If you guys ever look at a Snapchat map, like people film it as they go by and then you see it on the map. So I think it's really a source of community pride. And so I just love that those flags are at the front of town.
It's our tourist destination. People look at our flags as they go by.
Better than when we were going to be part of the planet lineup.
Oh dear.
All right, if there's nothing else, I'm going,
I do
you
have
do have
one.
something? Okay.
The housing choice application on June, or for the rural development network was coming up due on June 4th for our application. I'm just curious if the administration has talked to them and maybe submitting something shortly, or is that one?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, I did talk to them. They did indicate it was not just a matter of talk, there was a bit of a survey that we had to fill out and kind of submit to them, and then they would consider pick choices from there. So they had some kind of sample sort of stuff, templated stuff that you could look at. So I did spend the better part of yesterday and put something out and did submit it. So, you know, some of the questions obviously without, a little more discussion at a council level, which obviously I guess if we were to be selected, probably would get into some further discussion on that. But so it was best we could with what we had there. We did submit something because the deadline was quick, and she said, yeah, you had to fill out the survey. You couldn't just talk to her and get some help. So we did submit something. It was best as we did.
Anything else before we adjourn?
Thank you, Madam. So, just a quick update in terms of the strategic thing on the weekend. So I did get just late today, an agenda and actually the results of the survey, et cetera, that I'll be submitting here the next day or so. The plan is, based on that, Friday at 3 is when it will start, 3 till 7 on Friday. And then he's talking 9 to 3 on Saturday. So we'll put out some details in terms of that, for the weekend there. And we do have, basically the rooms are, everything will be at the Waterton Parks Lodge place. We did have the people could order breakfast and lunch for Saturday off the menu. So I think everyone, but don't want to name names, but.
It's me. I was like, I need to. I had to tomorrow every time.
Just saying. And then I did have, like a reservation for supper on Friday night as well, sort of in the 7:15 to 7:30 range, so.
Where's that at, reservation?
It is at the, what's it called?
Trattoria one?
No, I phoned there, but they said they won't take reservations of 10, it's too big, they're very small. So it's at the, Chop House or something like that, I think it's
Oh,
called,
the Lakeside Chop House, that's a nice place.
so.
That's great.
And then I guess we have other details or whatever will come as a result, but anyways, you'll get a sort of a bit of information before the week's out here, sort of thing, but that's kind of the rough idea, so.
Awesome, wonderful. Looking forward to that, that'll be good.
Is there anything else before? Okay. Would someone like to make a motion to adjourn at 8:56?
Yeah.
You will? Okay,
I moved to adjourn the meeting at 8:56, or go home and watch Stranger Things.
there you go. All in favor? That is carried, thank you.
I want to see that in motion.
I have to start watching that show. I gotta start watching more TV.
Guess
I just started watching Yellowstone.
Oh, I heard that's good.
Everybody's going on.
I started with like,
I know, I was just like,
Just M. Passy.
Okay. Not no M dot, just M passing.
Don't send it to the wrong
Okay.
link.
there's all of this for you.
Yeah, I